Oh yeah, absolutely. And I, I actually have a couple of concerns. I have concerns with my math lab homework that students rely too heavily on the learning aids. I have concerns that another student is doing their homework or quizzes. That's why I make the lion's share of my grade in-person assessments, right? Yeah, the tests are in class. So 75 to 83% of their grade is coming inside of class. And I warned them at the beginning, and I think the students need to hear this. The first thing I do is on day 2 or day 3, well, after the first My Math Lab assignment's done, I come in with a copy of an old exam. And I walk up to a student and I say, can you do me a favor? Can you push the Help Me Solve It button? And they're like, yeah, it's not on there. Yeah. How about show an example? No, that's not there either. Ask my instructor? No, that's not there either. So you can't rely too heavily on those. And they need to hear that, but then they understand what to watch out for. I also warn them that I do a little case study. Let's say a student has 100% homework in Chapter 8, and they scored 95 on the quizzes. And then they come to class and they take the exam and they score 7. What kind of conclusion would you draw from that? And I said, to me, there's really only 2 that I could draw. One, the student wasn't as prepared as they thought. They're not using their tools correctly. Or 2, somebody else is doing their work and nothing sticks out more than a jump from 100 to 7. Don't be that student. And, I'll show them that even if they score perfect on the homework and quizzes, what they need to score on the exams to pass, they can't score without understanding the material to some degree. I did give a survey, and I know on an earlier slide it said that there were 49 students that stayed. I actually had a 50th student that got a medical withdrawal the last week. So when I gave my survey, I had 50, which makes it easy for calculating percents. I was pretty happy about that. Let me show you a few of the questions I asked. How much time and effort have you put in compared to your last math class? Safe to say that they felt as a group they put in more time and effort? Absolutely. Should more time and effort lead to better understanding and learning? I think it should. How much has using my math lab increased your understanding? I did have one student who was between not at all and somewhat. I had 8 that were somewhere between somewhat and a lot, but that's half the students that said a lot. Encouraging. How has your performance been on the exams compared to what you expected at the beginning of the semester? 27 out of 50 higher. Okay. So they're doing better than they thought they would. Not surprising when you consider their low confidence heading in. I then became part of a group. We were working on developing a common final for our developmental math courses. So I ran out of the option to offer that carrot. And so I started looking for other ways to motivate them to do the same things I wanted. So the next semester, I had 2 classes. I bumped the test average to 80% because I thought so many of them had scored in the 80s that it didn't really matter, and asking for setting the expectations a little higher should be okay. It actually didn't work out so well for a couple of reasons. The dev math student on day 1 believes they can score 70. They believe they can squeak by with a C. They don't believe that they're a B student or better based on their past experiences. Second, the end of course assessment was so far down the line for them that it wasn't enough of a motivator, knowing that they still had to perform at the end. So although this contract was still performed better than its counterparts on campus, it wasn't quite the success that I experienced with the first one. So changed things up again in the thirds. Oh, I should probably talk about those. This really hits the redesign crowd. In California, we have what we call student learning outcomes. Use the same term here, SLOs. We have a list at that time of 10 SLOs 9 or 10 in each of our courses. We've really whittled that down. But at the time, I made up a quiz for each SLO in the course, and students would take those at the end of the semester, one as a way to jumpstart their review for the final, but two as a way for me to gather some data on which outcomes they were performing well with and which ones I needed to go back and work on. I stole the idea from a school in Texas out of the Making the Grade white paper. It was either the first one or the second one, where they did this in all of their courses, where students could come back and take the quizzes. I think they had a limit of 7 attempts, but the idea was they had to pass all those quizzes or they couldn't pass the class. It's kind of a nice way to even things out across the board so that you're sure that your most seasoned instructor and your newest instructor are covering the same topics. Let me move to the third semester. I tried to offer some incentives. They needed 70% on the final to pass the class. And I tried to offer sort of like a percentage buyback. You know, if they did all the homework at 100%, I gave them 2 points, 2% off that score. If their My Math Lab quizzes were at least 85%, I gave them 2 points off, and so on and so on. They could actually get it down to where they only needed a 60 to pass. Again, to a math student on day one, if you tell me I need a 70 or a 60 on the final, they sound the same. And so I'm not so sure I want to work that hard and end up in a very similar spot. So the student buy-in was lower than the first contract, still outperformed my colleagues' classes, but again, wasn't the wild success that I had experienced. Which leads me to my last contract, which I've used since this is the 4th semester in this approach. I give test-by-test contracts. Notice the criteria and my values are still there. 100% on every homework assignment. At least 85% on every quiz. No more than 1 absence during that testing period. Sometimes I include mandatory time in our tutoring lab. Sometimes I include group projects. Sometimes I include study skills activities. It depends on the course I'm teaching and the group that I have, and I change it from test to test. But for each test, I hand them out a contract with what they have to do. They sign it, turn it back in. If they can meet all of those, I give them a 10-point bonus on their exam. Now, 10 out of 100, that's 10%. And that sounds like a letter grade. But my exams are only half of my grade. So I'm really talking about a 5% bump at the end of the semester, maximum. How many students do you have that end up within 5 percentage points of passing? In my experience, that's a small number. Math is so bimodal, where students understand it and do well, or don't understand it and don't do well. I get very few in that 5% zone. So I felt comfortable with that. The nice thing about the test-by-test contract idea is that your student can struggle on the first exam, say, oh my gosh, I got to get my act together, and start doing the things that we need to on the second contract. I need to get those 10 points. I need to make up for my last score. They start working the way we want them to work. It gives them a chance, sort of at like a rebirth situation. And my students, I have, on every exam that I give, I would say that the average is around 50% will meet that contract. And it's not always the same 50%, but I do like the fact that they're able to come back and sort of reload. Anybody have any other questions that you wanted to go over? Sure. I do give a final exam. I don't give a contract for the final exam, but actually I'm glad you mentioned that. That's not a bad idea. You know, I could incorporate, for instance, in starting to think about how I would adapt what I've seen, I could incorporate my SLO quizzes. Should you complete all 9 or 10 at this percentage or better, I will give you this many points on your final exam. Encouraging them to review and work at the end is a good idea. Yeah, I've never given one. I may this semester. That's the best thing about these meetings. You know, I heard it earlier as well. I think it was Andrina. It's like the buffet. I'm trying to throw some ideas out at you, but I'm really hoping that I can steal an idea or two that I can bring home. And so, yeah, that's awesome. Sure.